Please tell me you are going to work. Come on. It should now be displayed. It says so here. Is it coming? Oh, good. Okay. So, unlike the others, it's derived only from the mesoderm. You never find connective tissue on external surfaces. It's packing. It's mostly packing. Oh, good. There we go. Unlike epithelial, it has a blood supply, so it's vascular. It has lots of capillaries in it. It contains sensory cells, especially the connective tissue of the skin. Things for deep pressure are found under the skin. So that's why light pressure, you find the sensory receptors right in the very surface, which is why if you stroke your hands across something, you can feel it. But deep pressure, the receptors are much further down, as you would expect, so that they only fire when you press hard. Pain receptors, you find those in deep areas. What's really interesting about pain receptors is that when your body starts off, pain receptors migrate across the body as you start off as just a bunch of cells. And I must bring Holly in one day to show you how this happens, because her patterning is really quite fascinating. So these little bits of tissue migrate to where they're supposed to go. But sometimes the pain receptors don't quite lose their connections, which is why sometimes you get a pain and you think it's in one place, but the problem's actually in another place. Appendicitis is classic. When you've got appendicitis, your appendix is on your right-hand side, but when you have appendicitis, if you press the left-hand side, that's the side that hurts the most, because you have a referred pain. And also they have temperature receptors. Connective tissue, here's a couple of examples of connective tissue. Connective tissue consists of fibers, and you can see these fibers, and cells, and those cells might not be all the same. You might have lots of different kinds of cells in there. And then you have this thing at the back called the matrix. So connective tissue provides a framework for the body. It's packing, if you like. It provides transport of dissolved substances. It goes around the outside of your internal organs to protect them, supports, surrounds, and connects your internal structures. It's used for the storage of energy, particularly fat storage, adipose tissue. And it defends the body against invading organisms, and that's your white blood cells and macrophages and things like that. So derived from the mesoderm, from mesenchyme, you get stellate cells. Stellate. Anyone who got any idea what shape a stellate star? Oh, I just told you. Duh. A star-like cell in a jelly. That's how it starts out. The matrix is just the background, and it can be a liquid, or it can be a jelly, or it can be quite firm, depending on the type of connective tissue it is. This mesenchyme gives rise to all of the other connective tissues. In adults, you've got scattered mesenchymal stem cells that assist in tissue repair after injury. So all around your body, you've got these little stem cells that kick in if something gets destroyed. You can have mucoid connective tissue. Mucoid is slimy, as you expect, and that surrounds the vessels of the umbilical cord. And it occurs sometimes in limited regions in the adult, and of course it happens particularly in wattles and combs of birds. That's why they're floppy. So connective tissue is made of three components: specialized cells, extracellular protein fibers, that's fibers that are outside the cells, ground substance, which is the background, everything in the background. Just like the ground that you stand on is everything in the background of what's on it, so is ground substance inside connective tissue. And together, the fibers and the ground substance provide the matrix of the tissue. So everything that isn't fibers and cells is ground, and if you take together and you lump the ground and the fibers together, you get what we term the matrix. Ground substance is a homogeneous filler. That just means it looks the same all over. It hasn't got any lumps and bumps in it. It can be a liquid, a gel, or a solid, and it's composed of unbranched glycoproteins called glycosaminoglycans. Waste and nutrients are exchanged in the ground substance. Ground substance acts as a shock absorber, and it prevents invasion by microorganisms. Because it can be thick and gluggy or it can be solid, microorganisms can't get through it. There are some microorganisms which produce an enzyme which starts to break it down so that they can get through, but on the whole, most microorganisms cannot get through the ground substance. They get stuck in it. So the matrix is made of these protein fibers and the ground substance, and the matrix is what surrounds all the cells. And unlike epithelial tissue, where the cells make up the majority of the tissue, in connective tissue, the matrix makes up the majority of the tissue. So in epithelia, you've just got lots of cells and nothing else, or very little else. And in connective tissue, you've got lots of matrix and very few cells. There are three types of fibers that you find in the matrix. There are collagen fibers, reticular fibers, and elastic fibers. I should just say that I've been through the textbook and I've made sure that everything, for those people who don't have a textbook and can't access this chapter yet, I have made sure I've covered everything in the lectures. So you should, if you haven't got the textbook, you should still be able to answer those learning activities. Okay. Collagen fibers. Long, white, straight fibers, but if you look at them under a microscope, they have a crimp. Now, a crimp is just a tiny little wave. So they look, if you just look at them, they look as though they're long and straight and white, but if you look at them more closely, you'll see that they actually have a little wave in them. And they form bundles. You find collagen fibers where tissue is continually stressed or stretched. Skin has lots of collagen fibers in it. The underlying skin, I hasten to add, because the top layer of skin is what? What do you think the top layer of skin is? Epithelium. Yep. What kind of epithelia? Squamous. Squamous. Stratified squamous, yep. It's very strong. It makes up tendons and ligaments. It can be packed tightly in tendons, or it can be packed loosely, and those are in protecting organs. And here is an example of some collagen fibers. And you can see that looking at them, they look as though they're lots of straight fibers together. Now, one of the tasks that you have this week is to draw all the different kinds of connective tissue that you come across. So if you're really smart, you're going to have a piece of paper out and you're going to start doing it now so that when you come to do it, it's half done. That's all I've got to say. Okay. Reticular fibers, they're also composed of collagen, but they look different. And these little black things, this is stained with silver, which is why it's black. All of these black lines are reticular fibers that you can see here. This is probably a lymph node. They form thin, delicate networks, like a net. They're called stroma. They tend to support functional cells of organs, and they stabilize the positions of blood vessels, cells, and other structures, because you don't want them moving from where you put them, do you? So you need them to stay in place, and these reticular fibers help to keep things in the right place. Elastic fibers, and you can see that these are little wave, they have a very definite crimp to them. You can see this little wave here that you can see. They're composed mainly of elastin. They can form networks like reticular fibers, or they can be in bunches of coiled microfibers, microfibrils. One of the things about the elastic fibers, as their name would suggest, is that after they've stretched, they will return to their normal length. You can find single fibers in loose connective tissue. You can find them all down the sides of walls of arteries. Notice it's arteries, not veins. Arteries are the ones that have the elastic walls. Veins do not. You find them in the nuchal ligament. Now, the head of an animal is quite heavy. We're not too bad a state because we've got a short neck. Even though we've got 7 cervical vertebrae like everything else, we've got a short neck, and our head is above our body. If you stick your head out, like a quadruped, and you've got a very heavy head and a longish neck, that head is going to start drooping and you're going to be continually having to contract your muscles to control it, which would cause fatigue. So animals like horses and cows, they have their ligament that goes down the back of their neck, which is called the nuchal ligament, and that helps to hold up their head so that their muscles don't have to constantly contract to do it. You also find elastic fibers in the vocal cords, as you would expect, because the vocal cords are moving all the time to give different frequencies that you can hear. There are two main classifications of cells in connective tissues. There are fixed cells and wandering cells. Fixed cells, we start with fibroblasts or fibrocytes. Now, blast means to form. So if you get a fibroblast, what's it doing? What kind of cell is it? Look at what's on the front. What's it going to do? A fibroblast. Anybody? What do you think the fibro stands for? Just been talking about them. Fibers, thank you, a voice from the wilderness, well done. So, if fibro stands for fibers, what does a fibroblast do, if blast means to form? Forms fibers. Well done. Cyte means cell, so what's a fibrocyte? A fiber cell. There's no trick to this. This is word building. It's really good. So fibroblasts are the main cell type that you will find in connective tissue. And this is a little, I hasten to add, they're not this color. They just stain them that color to make them look pretty. They have an irregular shape. So you can see here's one here, here's one here, here's one here, here's one here. All these little green things with the blue dots. And the blue dots are the nucleus, the green bits are the cell. Fibroblasts make protein fibers and the ground substance for the matrix. And these are the predominant cell that you will find in connective tissue. Adipocytes. Adipose tissue is fat tissue. It stores lipids. So an adipocyte is a what? If adipose is fat, an adipocyte is a fat cell. Okay. They look like fibroblasts when they're immature, but as they mature, they fill with lipid, which is liquid fat, and then the nucleus of the cell, and you can see in this one here, the nucleus of the cell is being pushed to one side, and the lipid fills up the cell. And when you get a group of these together, it's called adipose tissue, and this is a picture of adipose tissue up here. Looks a bit like, do they call them aero here? Do they call chocolate with bubbles in an aero? Yeah. So it looks like an aero bar inside. Reticular cells. Here is a reticular cell here, and you can see it's a flat star-shaped cell. So here's the cell, here's his cell nucleus, and you can see all these little bits that a bit like the prongs on a star. And these manufacture reticular fibers. So they would be reticular what? Reticular blasts. You're getting the hang of this. Well done. And a mature cell will be a reticulocyte. Good. They have an immune function. We're not sure what that immune function is. The jury is still out. There's a lot of toing and froing going on about what they actually do. But they're found in lymph nodes, spleen, and bone marrow, so we would expect them to have something to do with the manufacture of white blood cells. Whether they do or not, we still don't know. Okay, fixed connective tissue cells. Well, we talked about mesenchymal cells. These are the stem cells. And these divide when you have an injury or you have an infection. And they can differentiate into lots of different types of cells depending on what's needed. And then the next one is a melanocyte. Now, anybody got any idea what a melanocyte, where you would find a melanocyte? Sorry? In the skin, well done. Melanocytes produce melanin, and melanin is suntan. So it's what gives you your suntan. It's also what helps you get over, if you don't get enough sunshine, you then can get depressed, and it's one of the things about, one of the reasons why people who have jet lag take melanin to try and restore their system. Mast cells. Now, wandering cells we're now on to. These are the wandering cells, mast cells. These are oval-shaped. Don't look very oval here, but they are. They contain lots of grains of histamine, And anyone who's got asthma knows about histamine, because that's what... Has anybody here had an asthma challenge before? Yay. Joy, isn't it? It's a lovely thing. They get you to breathe in histamine and then see if you've got asthma, because if you've got asthma, you have an attack. It's a very exciting experience. It's one I never want to repeat again in my whole life. Because it doesn't just knock you off for the day, it knocks you off for an entire week, right? Makes you ill for a week. Yep. So these are these little guys. They've got lots of histamine and heparin in them. So what these little guys do is, if there's inflammation, they go to where the inflammation is, they release their chemicals into the area, and then the heparin stops the blood from clotting if it's an infection, stops the blood from clotting there if there's any leak from the capillaries, and then it makes the capillaries more leaky, so that you allow more blood to get into the area that's got a problem. And of course, if you've got more blood getting in there, you've also got more white blood cells, so you've got more of your immune system getting into that area. And that triggers more of the white blood cells to come, so you get this nice circle happening. As you would expect, mast cells are found near blood vessels because that's their target. And when they sense an invading cell, they just burst open and let their stuff out. Macrophage. Now, macro, it means big, as you all know. Phage means to eat. So a macrophage is a what kind of cell? A big eating cell, that's right. And sometimes macrophages can join together to make one humongous big eating cell. So these are macrophages. Sometimes you'll see them referred to as histiocytes. They're important immune cells, and they phagocytose crap that you've got in your system. So phagocytose, that's when they engulf something. It's endocytosis. So they engulf something, the two arms that go out join together, they have whatever it is inside the cell, and then they usually pour enzymes on it and destroy it. These are also the cells that produce antibodies, so that your immune system can recognize whatever they have phagocytosed. So they say, this is what I just found, watch out for that. In nervous tissue, they're called microglia. And in the liver, they're called Kupffer cells. Now, I'm going to do this in fear and trepidation because it probably won't work. But one of the very interesting things I found, yes, go, is this is, if it works, yeah, okay, yes, agree and continue, go. This is a little movie of, doesn't take very long, it's only about a minute. And no, it wasn't Microsoft I sent you to. I'm sure it wasn't. See, I knew it wasn't. And one of the things that this shows is it shows you how they actually see things. So this is a macrophage that you can see here, and these little red bits are its active areas, and you can see that all the time he's moving and sensing the area around him, looking for things that shouldn't be there. As soon as it sees something that shouldn't be there, it then is switched on to phagocytose. But all the time that they're in your body, this is what they're doing. They have different areas that is being fired up to look for stuff. This is actually it's an HIV-infected human macrophage. Okay. So the other main wandering connective tissue that you get is blood, and the cells that you find in blood, they are leukocytes or red blood cells. Leukocytes, leuko means white, cyte is cell, so a leukocyte is a white cell. Lots of the words that we have for things in the body come from Greek. So if you watch my big fat Greek wedding, he's not too far off. So, leukocytes can migrate freely through connective tissue, and they respond to infection, and they can produce inflammation, which then triggers other white blood cells to their place. Now, the first one is a neutrophil. This is a neutrophil. These are red blood cells. In Greek, red is erythros, so these are erythrocytes. Red blood cells are erythrocytes, white blood cells are leukocytes. This is one of the leukocytes. It's a neutrophil. And you can see he's got a purplish background when he's stained with hematoxylin and eosin. And you can see that his nucleus is quite distinctive. It sort of looks like a bit like a dumbbell, if you like, or a pair of headphones. You can also see that there are very few of these white blood cells. If you look at all of these, there are very few white blood cells in the body, but there are millions and trillions and billions of red blood cells. So there are very much, I think it's a thousandth less or something like that. Okay, so this is a neutrophil. This one here is a basophil. Now it's called basophil because philia is to like, and base is basic. So if you put a stain on there that has a pH greater than 7, then it's much more likely that this cell will stain in preference to any of the other white blood cells. So you'll get it showing up. And his nucleus doesn't show up very well. You've got lots of little bits in him. So he shows up as granular. And because most of the basic stains that you'll be dealing with are blue, he usually turns up purple. And you can see all the little red blood cells around him. This is a lymphocyte. You can see he's slightly bigger than the basophil. And his stained area takes up most of his interior, but not all of it. So they're very distinctive. Neutrophil, basophil, lymphocyte, and the last one is an eosinophil. Phil to like, eosin is a red stain, it's acidic. So when you stain with eosin, you tend to get this cell showing up as red compared to the others. Just to bring you back. My dog would do that. So classification, classified into two main groups, connective tissue proper and specialized connective tissue. Connective tissue proper is loose connective tissue or dense connective tissue. And dense can be further broken down into regular, irregular, and elastic connective tissue. The specialized ones are cartilage, bone, and blood. So, loose connective tissue. Now, if you're looking at a piece of tissue and it's got lots of background in it, a few fibers and a few cells, you know you've got loose connective tissue. It can be areola. Areola just means full of holes or full of nothing. It can be adipose. When you saw adipose, it's like an aero bar. It's got those bubbles in it. Or it can be reticular connective tissue. Areola, little spaces. So it's very loosely arranged array of fibers in a thick ground substance which appears translucent. You can see through it. So it looks like the tissue is just a few fibers and a few cells and nothing else. The ground substance is composed mostly of hyaluronic acid, which allows movement of waste and nutrients. Now, I'm sure that most females here will know that this is the latest thing they're putting into face creams, is hyaluronic acid. It's the new wonder. Look at me. Nothing works, okay? There is no diet that works. There is no face cream that works. Get used to it. Age gracefully. That's what I am determined to do. Doesn't mean you can't put crap on your face, but just be aware it doesn't work. So you might as well use a cheap one. I had an aunt who lived to be 80, didn't have a single wrinkle on her face, and she used Pond's Curl Cream, which is probably the cheapest thing you can possibly buy in the shops. And I came to the conclusion it was because she had nothing between her ears, so she never worried about anything. Everything was a continuous excitement, amazement, and joy to her. She was a lovely, lovely person, but nothing ever worried her, and I'm sure that she didn't have any children, she didn't have any husband, she just had a dog. She was in heaven, really. No wrinkles. As soon as you have children, you get wrinkles. Well, as soon as you get a husband, you have wrinkles, but you know. Children don't help. Okay. Okay. Not that I would trade any of them for the world, but you know. I actually upset my husband because he asked me if he died would I marry again, and I was a bit too quick. And I said, definitely not. And he looked at me and he said, oh, have I been that bad? And I said, well, where am I? If I say yes, then you're going to be upset. if I say, no, you're upset, I can't win. And I said no, because it's taken me 44 years to get you to the state I've got you at now, and I'm still not happy. So I don't have another 44 years left in me. Poor devil. Don't worry, he says there's bad things about me. We're all right. So, ground substance composed mostly of hyaluronic acid, which allows movement of waste and nutrients. It inhibits the movement of microorganisms because it's so thick and gluggy. Some cells have a substance called hyaluronase. Now, A's at the end means it eats whatever's, or breaks up, should I say, not eats, breaks down whatever's in the front of it. So hyaluronase liquefies hyaluronic acid. Okay, so it can get through by secreting this stuff, which, if you like, melts the bit in front so that it can move, a bit like an icebreaker in the sea. The leukocyte goes in and it melts the bit in front and moves, and melts the bit in front and moves, etc., and it can get through the tissue that way. The predominant cell in areolar tissue is the fibroblast. It's the most common type of connective tissue in the body. It provides padding and packing. And it allows skin to be separated from muscle. Because the one thing if you lift your skin, if you lift it up, you can actually feel your skin. You can lift it up off your arm, or anywhere, in fact. As you get older, you can lift more. But, you can lift it up. And that's because you've got areolar tissue in the hypodermis. Hypo, low, dermis, skin. So in the lowest level of your skin, you've got areolar tissue, which allows this movement to disconnect between the skin and the muscle. Otherwise, every time you moved a muscle, all of your skin would move. It would be quite unpleasant, I should think. So this is an example of loose connective tissue. So here are our fibers. These pink things are our fibers. And these blue bits are our cells. And you can see there's a lot of ground substance. There's a lot of stuff that looks like there's nothing there. And that's all a sort of a jelly stuff in the background. Fat tissue, adipose tissue. Very similar to areolar tissue. But it has more cells in it, so it has lots of fat cells depending on how fat you are. Now, one of the bad news bits for anybody who's slightly overweight is once your fat cells are full, your body makes new ones from stem cells. So if you're ever really, really overweight, the only way that, and then, of course, what happens is that when you go on a diet, the cells, you start to use your fat up. But once your fat cells start to get empty, they start to tell your body that you're hungry because they're empty. So you get a drive to eat. So the only way to stop that is to have the cells sucked out of you, which is why, of course, liposuction is so popular. But what I want to know is, if you have it sucked out of your thighs, right, so you've got really thin thighs, and then you fall off the wagon and you start to eat again, do you end up with really big bottoms of your legs? And then your leg goes up and it goes into this little pipe at the top. I mean, I'd like to know, but I daren't ask anybody. Okay. It's composed of adipocytes, fat cells. It gives you insulation. It's found under the skin. It's shock absorption. You find it in the stifle in horses. It's packaging and filling. You'll find it around your kidneys to protect them. You find it in all the important places that you need to protect yourself. It's metabolically active, which means that those lipids are broken down and replaced all the time. Now, in adults, we have a lot of white fat, and in newborns, they have a lot of brown fat. Now, brown fat produces more energy than white fat. So it's more metabolically active than the white fat that we have, and we lose it as we get older. So it's very important that brand new babies who are born, who may not have much fat on them because they've been relying on their mother, they have to keep their body temperature going as soon as they're born. And suddenly they're taken from this nice humidicrib that is the womb straight out to this horrible cold environment. And you'll see sometimes when newborn babies come out, they start to shiver straight away because it's cold out here and I'm wet. So they have to start using up that brown fat quite quickly to keep their body temperature right. You find fat between the scapula, between the two shoulder blades of small mammals. I've got a bit there myself now that I come to think of it. And I'm not very tall, so I suppose that's me. I'm a small mammal. Okay. Because it is very metabolically active, it has to have lots of blood cells. That's how we're going near it. So you find that fat tissue's got lots of capillaries in it, and it also has lots of mitochondria associated with it, because you have to be able to break it down, make it into energy that's usable, and you also have to be able to package and put it back. You get rapid lipid breakdown when you're stimulated by the nervous system, and it does that when you're very cold. So when you're shivering, you'll get this rapid breakdown of fats to help you. That's why people in the Northern Hemisphere can eat suet pudding, and which I really, really love, and lentils and all that stuff. And there's a lot of them, as long as you don't eat the chocolate and the rest of the crap, they don't get too fat because they're using it to keep warm. They do this by breaking it down. Whenever you break down foods, you produce heat. It's one of the byproducts. So when you're doing this process of breaking down your fat, you produce heat. So that's a non-shivering thermogenesis. Then your muscles will kick in and they'll start to contract very quickly, and then you're using lots of other energy, which makes the cold bigger, so you're having more of this. So heat produces heat, if you see what I mean. And because the blood is in that tissue, when it breaks down the fats, which produces the heat, it will warm up the blood in that vessel. That vessel will then take that blood around the body, so it warms up the rest of the body too. Has anybody ever tried to breathe through their mouth when it's really, really cold? Have you ever done that? Yeah. What happens?
I always breathe through my mouth anyway, so it's really cold.
If it's really, really cold and you breathe through your mouth will shut automatically. Oh no, sorry, wrong way around. Hang on. No, see, it's been a long time since I've been in the cold. No, it's wrong way around. If you breathe through your nose in the cold and it's really, really cold, that's right. If you breathe through your nose and it's really, really cold, your mouth will open and you'll start to breathe through your mouth. Anybody got any ideas why that is? Think about where your nose is and where your brain is. If you're breathing through your nose and the air going into your nose doesn't warm up and it's really, really cold, it starts to cool down your brain. So your brain puts in a reflex which opens your mouth, because your mouth's further away from your brain, to make you breathe through your mouth. So you don't cool your brain down. It's very clever. That's why if you try to run for a bus and it's snowing, well, no, not when it's snow stopped, because when it's snowing it's quite warm. When you're running for a bus, as I did many times in my youth, you can't breathe through, you have to start breathing through your mouth, and then it really starts to hurt. It's horrible. Okay, loose connective reticular tissue. Again, this is a lymph node. Then the reticular fibers are stained black in here. It makes a framework that covers the liver, the lymph, and lymph nodes. Dense regular tissues. Now, dense regular fibrous connective tissue is composed of parallel collagen fibers which are tightly packed together. So as opposed to the loose one where you had lots of matrix, in the dense one you've got lots of fibers. The fibers lie in the direction of the force that you're putting on them. So they also, because they've got lots of fibers and very little ground substance, they've got a very poor blood supply. And that can make them slow to heal. So ligaments and tendons, I don't know if any of you have ever torn one, can take an awful long time to get better. So you find this dense regular fibrous tissues and ligaments and tendons. And note the difference between a tendon and a ligament. A tendon joins a muscle to a bone, and a ligament joins a bone to a bone. If you can't remember, just remember that your Achilles tendon is the one that goes up the back of your calf. I'm about to paint a picture you're not going to like, so it's going to help you remember. Your Achilles tendon goes up the back of your leg, okay, up your calf muscle. It attaches your calf muscle to your ankle and to the bones of your leg. If you break the Achilles tendon near your ankle, the whole muscle rolls up into a ball. Anybody done it? It is excruciatingly painful. And you can see it, the leg goes boof at the back, and this whole muscle just rolls up. That's your Achilles tendon. So if you remember that, you'll remember that tendons join muscles to bones, and then you'll know that ligaments join bones to bone, and you won't get them mixed up. Here we have our Achilles tendon. So here is the muscle here. Here is the tendon joining you to the heel bone. And if this breaks, that whole muscle just goes whoop, just like a blind going up when you let go of it. It's quite spectacular if you're watching. Not so spectacular if it's you. And here we have the tendon, and you can see you've got all of these fibers going down here. And you can see they're all going in the same direction. And because this muscle is pulling that way, it's pulling upwards and downwards, so it's pulling, whoops, it's going to pull that way on this tendon. You've got all those fibers going in that direction, the direction of the force that's going to be put on it. Irregular dense connective tissue, this is an example of it. These are collagen fibers. And you can see that although there's some going this way, and there's some going that way, and there's some going the other way, it's got an interwoven meshwork of collagen fibers. There's no set pattern. You find that in the dermis of the skin, and you find it on capsules which surround organs like the kidney. Elastic dense connective tissue, again, you've got this really parallel fibers happening, found in the nuchal ligament, which is that one that helps with the head. It's also found between vertebrae of the spine. It's found where stretching is needed, so you find it on the walls of arteries, in the bladder, in the bronchi, which is your tube that goes down to your lungs. These elastic fibers can be straight, or they can be in a meshwork, and in this case you can see they are straight. This is actually a nuchal ligament that you can see here. Fluid connective tissue. Well, there's only two kinds of fluid connective tissue. There's blood and there's lymph. Now, lymph vessels are parallel to the veins. They run parallel to the veins. And if any of the veins or the arteries are leaking and you get lots of fluid in your system, then the lymph system is there to sop it up. Supporting connective tissue, that's cartilage and bone. Dear me. It's like, did any of you ever, I received, my sister-in-law, who has a sense of humour, strangely enough, sent me a weather thing, which consisted of a stick, which you apply to a tree, and it says, if wet, raining. Which I thought was quite funny. Okay, fluid connective tissue, blood. Here are our red blood cells. And what kind of white blood cell would this be, folks? Neutrophil, well done. So your plasma is the watery matrix. So plasma is the matrix of the blood cells. These cells include, now, I've put platelets there, but these are platelets here. These are little black things, little dots there. They're not cells. Platelets are actually bits of cells. They start off as one big cell, they break up into lots of little bits. So platelets are actually fragments of cells, they're not actually cells at all. Erythrocytes, red blood cells, leukocytes, white blood cells. And I've already talked about the different divisions of the white blood cell. Here we are, some platelets, bits of cells in the dog. This is a monocyte that you find in the horse, which is a kind of lymphocyte, where you can tell that because it's got this big area. Most of its cell is filled. Here is a lymphocyte in a dog. Again, most of its area is filled. A couple of platelets in there. The rest are all red blood cells. Lymph is found inside the tissues. It sops up interstitial fluid. Lymphocytes make up about 99% of the lymph cells. It's a very important storage area for white blood cells, because these are the ones that help to fight infection and make memory cells, etc., so they recognize stuff. And they tend to, lymph vessels go into nodes, little sort of network centers, if you like, little relay stations, and the white blood cells sit in there, so anything that's sopped up from the tissues goes into the lymph goes to their little relay station, the white blood cell says, hang on a minute, that shouldn't be there, I'm going to fight that, and I'm going to trigger an infection and tell everybody there's a problem here. And lymph glands swell up generally in the area where there's a problem. Mumps is a classic example of swelling of lymph nodes. Sometimes if you get an infection in your throat, your glands swell up underneath your neck. Sometimes you get infections where the glands swell up in your armpit or in your groin. They're all telling the body there's a problem. And this is why when you have cancer, if you're diagnosed with cancer, if they remove the cancer, they remove the lymph nodes, because it's quite possible that the tissue has gone into the lymph system and it will get stuck in one of these relay stations where the white blood cells are, and they'll try and fight it. But if you take the lymph node away, you might take away any wandering cells from the cancer too. They're phagocytes, cell eaters. Oh, that's so cute. Okay, cartilage, 3 kinds of cartilage: hyaline, elastic, and fibrous. And of course the other supporting one is bone. This is hyaline cartilage. Now, cartilage is very easy to distinguish because its cells look like ladders. You see how they've got these cells? You've got 1, 2, 3 cells there. You've got 1, 2, 3 cells here. They sort of look a bit like ladders. Each of the nuclei of the cells, these little black things are the nuclei, sit inside a lake of fluid. That's their matrix, is a fluid lake. And that's called a lacunae, which means lake. This is the trachea. And you can see this is the matrix in the background that you can see here. Here are our little cartilage cells. Here are our little lacunae inside our little fluid-filled lakes. And inside those you've got your nucleus of your cell. So in cartilage, the matrix is chondroitin sulfate. Chondros means cartilage. So a chondroblast would be what? A cell that makes cartilage. A chondrocyte is a cartilage cell. Now, the chondroitin sulfate forms complexes with proteins that are called proteoglycans. The chondrocytes, the cells themselves, they sit inside the lacunae or the lakes, and they don't divide in the adult. They actually have interstitial growth, and I'll talk about that more when we talk about bone next time. It's avascular. The exchange of nutrients and waste is by diffusion through the matrix, so the actual cells themselves do not come in contact with any blood. You get the cartilage forming in tissues. So you get this cartilage tissue, it's avascular, but on the outside you have a tissue called the perichondrium. Peri, around, like in perimeter, chondros, cartilage, ium, tissue. So it's a tissue that goes around the cartilage. So when I say that bones have periosteum, what does that mean? It's the tissue that goes around the bone. See, if you can word build, a lot of this stuff you don't have to learn it, and we'll have to leave it there. Thank you, folks. That's it. See you on Wednesday. Enable editing. Insert comment. Insert comment.